So today on the Kei Truck, we're going to be installing some LED headlights. So originally I wasn't even intending on making a video on this because I'm putting headlights in. It's not that involved. But once I put the headlights in, I found out they didn't work. And it's not the bulb's fault. I realized it was a wiring issue within the truck, but it's not a wiring problem with the truck. It's just how these trucks are wired. So to overcome it, we have to install some extra wiring and some relays, and I'm going to show you why. So why are we installing this? Well, on a very dim road, you can't see anything with this truck. These old headlights are so dim, so I really wanted to brighten it up, both for safety reasons and visibility reasons. It's actually one of the reasons I installed a big light bar on the top, but obviously I don't want to be driving against traffic and have that big light bar on. So sometimes I just need to light the main part of the road up better, so I decided to install some LED lights. I've done this on all my cars before. I really like the look of the LED lighting, and so I decided to put these kind of cheesy green LED halo rings on it. I hate these lights normally, but on this truck I think they work. It's just, this truck is so goofy, and I think it makes it look a little bit more like a frog, and I don't know, I just like them. So either way, I pulled the old headlights out, I put the new lights in, they didn't light up. So why didn't these bulbs work? Well, it took me a little bit to figure out, but it's basically negative switching. What's negative switching? I don't know. Actually, I didn't know. I know now. What negative switching is it's the way that some car manufacturers wire their accessories. So a 12-volt accessory, if you want to turn it on or off, you have to send power to it and a ground to it. And if you decide you want to shut that off through the power switch, it would be a positive switch. So the 12-volt power would run through the switch, get broken by the switch, and then continue on its way. And when you toggle the switch on and off, the light or the accessory or whatever it is turns on. With a negative switch, what you would do is you still send the power and ground to the switch, but now the negative is actually broken by the switch. Which way is better, positive or negative switching? I don't know. That's kind of above my pay grade. What I would assume is that if you had a switch that had a power problem and melted down, if that was a negative switch, it wouldn't ground or cause any problems within the dashboard or wherever the switch was. So maybe that's a little bit safer. I don't know, but what I do know is that these headlights will not work the way that we have them. So why do these bulbs not work in this car? LED lights, as a rule, require positive power to travel specifically through one end of the connector. You can't reverse positive and negative with it, whereas an old halogen light's a little bit more forgiving. So theoretically, you could use a halogen bulb and flip the positive and negative and it'll still light. So on a negatively switched car, there's one positive with two negatives, and each negative controls the high or the low beam, and those are in a certain location on the prongs. On a positive switch car, like what this light is looking for, there are two positive leads and one negative lead. Each one of the positive leads is controlling one of the high beams or low beams. So even though the harness is the same, it actually affects how the light flows through the bulb. We also have to take care of the halo ring. I don't want the halo ring to just turn on all the time. I want to be able to control it, especially because it's green and I'm not sure how legal that is. But when I'm at a car show or something like that and I want to light it up, I can do so independently of the actual headlights. So we're actually going to install some extra wiring and a switch just to control the green LED halo. So I could make up some jumper wires and kind of go from one to the other within the harness and just kind of change where they connect to, but that would give me problems constantly with my high beams and low beams. So the method that we're going to use to handle this is to install some relays and some wiring. Now I'm going to show you how to build the harness, but I actually just bought one on Amazon. It's way easier to just buy these. They're about 20 bucks or so. They're probably not the best of quality, but it'll do what it has to do. It's a couple relays and some wiring. Go on Amazon and type in negative switch harness and you'll come up with like 30 different options, but I'll show you in the meantime how this actually works. So if you're not familiar with relays, here's a very quick explanation. A relay is basically a cheap, serviceable, and replaceable switching device that allows you to pull a heavy amp load out of a standard switch and deliver cleaner power directly to the accessory. Since the heavy amp draw is no longer in the switch itself, you'll extend the life of the switch and you'll have less voltage drop over the length of the wire. If you have a dim light in an old car, there's a good chance you don't have a relay. This is a pretty standard Bosch style relay. They're about $5. Depending on the style, they have 4 or 5 spade terminals. The terminals are labeled 30, 85, 86, 87, and sometimes 87A. Let's go back to our simple wiring diagram and clear out the wires. First, we'll make some room for the relay. Here's our relay and the 4 pins on it. Don't worry about the orientation of these, let's just decide where all the wires go first. It's good practice to bring a clean, fused 12-volt power source directly to terminal 30. Now, in a positive switched scenario, some sort of accessory or 12-volt power would run to the 86 pin. We would ground the number 85 terminal to the chassis of the car, and number 87 goes directly to the light or accessory you're trying to power. The grounds don't really matter here, as most of them will just go to the chassis of the car. So when you turn your switch to the on position, power will flow to terminal 86, which acts as a trigger to close the circuit between 30 and 87, sending pure, clean 12-volt power to the light or accessory. Now the switch isn't doing any heavy lifting, and amp load is transferred to the relay. Now for our purposes, we're trying to correct the polarity of the LED light, but a healthy byproduct of that is removing the amp load from the switch as well. But because we have a high and low beam, we'll need two relays. So let's break down a new diagram. This is more or less our current Suzuki setup. We have a switch with 3 positions, high, low, and off. We have halogen bulbs with a shared 12-volt power, and 2 negative leads for high and low. The power goes directly to the middle prong on each of the bulbs, but the negatives run to the switch. Now let's clear all that wiring off and add a couple of relays to this diagram. The top one is going to handle the high beams, and the bottom one is going to handle the low beams. Since the bulbs are now LEDs, we'll represent those with 2 positives, one for high and one for low, and then a common ground. I'll also make a 12-volt positive for the green halo ring, but we'll discuss that later. We'll connect a wire from pin 30 on both relays back to the battery with an inline fuse. Each LED headlight will have a new local ground connected to the chassis under a bolt or screw. Let's connect terminal 87 on this first relay to the low beam side of the headlights. And then we'll connect terminal 87 of the second relay to the high beam side of the headlights. Now, the existing switch runs through a harness to both sockets connecting the old headlights. We'll utilize these signal wires and the 12-volt source from one of those plugs to make the final connections. We'll send the high beam negative wire to the 86 pin of the high beam relay. Then the low beam signal wire will go to terminal 86 on the low beam relay. Then the middle pin of the OEM wire harness will go to terminal 85 in both relays. Catch the rainbow. So let's make a nicer version of this mess. Feel free to screen grab this if you're going to make your own harness. So the final harness will look something like this. Now again, for ease of installation, I just bought this harness. It had all the proper connectors on all the ends, so it's just saved me a bunch of time. They're pre-assembled and ready to plug and play. Although I did have to extend the positive lead on my battery, because the battery of the Kei Truck is a few more feet away than a typical engine bay. So let's get on with the installation. So first I have to remove the front fascia with the Suzuki plate. To do that, there's 2 quick little turn knobs on the inside of the cab on each side. Once these are off, you give a little tug on the bottom of the panel, and the panel pops out. I pulled the old headlights out, starting with the marker lights. Now I can remove the headlight trim rings and retainers. I wire up the harness just to make sure that it's functioning the way it should. I remove the second light. I unscrew the retaining clips and remove the old halogens from the bezel. Then replace them with the new LED lamps. Now I'm ready to install the wires and relays. I route the wires from the relay harness through the upper part of the wiper panel. Now each side has a new headlight connector. While I'm here, I run 2 auxiliary wires to handle the green halo lights, and pull those to the driver's side of the cab. Now those are ready to be reinstalled. Here's where the new ground is installed. I keep the relays toward the passenger side because that's a closer run to the battery. I want these relays to be easy to service and somewhat weatherproofed. That's why I decided to mount them under the dash. What I'm going to do is depin these relay harnesses. The only thing that needs to come to the outside of the car is this one has to run to the battery, this red one, and then I need these 2 inside the car. So I'm going to use the existing grommet for the headlight, try to get the extra wires through there. I have to separate all these first and then repin them all back. So I hope I remember where everything goes. I take note of the placement of all the wires and begin depinning. Once I have the wires pushed through the grommet, I reattach all the wires to the relay harness. These harnesses make disconnecting and reconnecting the relays a breeze. If you make a full harness by yourself, I highly recommend these relay connector harnesses. I reinstall the passenger headlight. Now I have to bring the power back to the battery. I just route it up the chassis near some other factory power wires. I quickly test the lights to make sure everything works, and then reinstall the black bezel and the parking lights. Okay, so the headlights work. The only thing that doesn't work is the little green LED trim ring that goes around this. I want to control that on its own. I don't want it to come on with the parking lights or anything else. So I have another switch. It actually says bumper lights on it, which is kind of appropriate, but I can always get new switch plates that say something different. So what we're going to do now, we have 4 extra bays here to install switches. So what I'm going to do is I pulled these red wires through that are connected to those green lenses. I have to send power to this switch and then split the power out to those 2 LED lights, and we should be good. Okay, so I tested the switch. I got power going to the power. This is going to turn the LED light on. These are my 2 wires going to each of the front headlights, and then I'm just gonna put a spade terminal connector on that, hook it up, test it out, and then we'll cut this extra blank and get it in there. Alrighty, let's get the front fascia back on and then button everything up, and I think we're done with the LED light install. Let's see how it looks with the actual headlights. There it is, everything lit up. We're good to go. So this is a pretty easy install if you buy the harness. Even if you don't, it's not that bad, it's just a little tricky and you have to keep track of the wires. Let's check this out at night and blind some neighborhood cats. I'm very happy with this install. It's ridiculously bright, but it's not really blinding to other drivers. I tested it out coming the other way, and it's pretty reasonable, as long as you don't have the high beams on and the roof bar is off. Anyway, that's it for the Kei Truck. Stay tuned, I swear I'm going to have an unveiling / intro onto the SS soon. But the Buick got in a little accident recently, so maybe I'm going to be onto that. She's so pretty. If you have any questions about this installation, please be sure to leave a comment below. I try to answer everything as best I can. Also, if you like this content, be sure to subscribe. Or don't. I don't care. I mean, I do, but I don't. But I do. Thanks, and see you next time.